If you're someone like me who's ever struggled to hunt in the month of October, then this video is for you. We're going to be breaking down the October lull and how to effectively hunt it and be successful. First off, let's break down what the October lull is and what hunters mean when they say it. It seems like hunters, a lot of times, they'll be seeing deer all summer long feeding out in open fields, and then after their bow season comes in, all of a sudden all the deer vanish and they're not seeing those deer anymore. Their trail cam pictures turn from daylight everyday bucks to nocturnal deer at night. Basically just throws you for a loop because you're like, did the deer basically die? Did they vanish? You don't know what happened to them. In my opinion, there are multiple factors that contribute to the October lull occurring. Number one being is hunting pressure. Now, in a state like Maryland, our bow opener opens up in early September, and we're able to have a couple days, if not a week, of really good hunting because we're hunting unpressured deer that have been on their same summer feeding pattern all summer long. And if you're able to know that pattern, you can be pretty successful in that first week of the season. Now, in a state that opens up their bow season in October, it's the same situation. They'll have a couple days of exceptional hunting, and then after that, the deer start to catch on to that hunting pressure and will start changing up their patterns. And it might be a situation where you had a group of deer coming out 30 minutes before dark. Now they're coming out right at dark. So you're basically experiencing that October lull in September and October. It's when that hunting pressure basically is really kicking in. That is a major change of how deer are going to be moving and reacting to your presence. Now, another factor in the October lull is a deer's natural shift in its home range. Now, this can happen, I would say anywhere from sometime in August, till sometime in October. Somewhere in that time frame, those deer are going to shift their home range. Why is this? Well, deer prefer different types of habitat at different times of the year. Now, preferred summer-spring habitat is going to be areas where there's typically water, there's high-quality food sources, soybeans, alfalfa, and also if it's a buck, they don't want to be in thick cover. They prefer more open hardwoods and fields because they don't want to damage their velvet. One of my killer spots for early season is on a north-facing slope, so it's cool. It's very wide open hardwoods with oaks. There's a lot of white oaks there. It's right by a stream, and when the farmer has planted it in alfalfa and the beans are still green, there's always a bachelor group of bucks in there the first couple of days of the season, and typically some nice ones. Now that is summer habitat. That's completely different than their preferred fall habitat. And a lot of times in that October lull, people are basically they're seeing deer in a certain area, and then all of a sudden the deer just vanish. Where do they go? Well, it's because they probably shifted to that preferred fall habitat. Very thick security cover that's basically just high stem count where the bucks feel safe and secluded. They're not going to want to be in wide open hardwoods where they can see 300 yards and you can see them at 300 yards. They're going to prefer that thicker security cover, and they're probably going to shift from those green soybeans. When they start to turn brown, those deer are probably going to want to start keying in on more of those acorn food sources. So starting off this list at number one is to hunt cold fronts. Cold fronts are a phenomenal thing to hunt because it basically helps create deer movement in daylight. Bucks will be coming back to bed later in the mornings, and they'll be coming out to their food sources typically earlier in the evenings. At this time of the year, deer are starting to develop their fall coat. And think about it, if you were wearing a jacket and it was 70 degrees out, you're probably not going to be moving too much in the basically heat of the day. You're going to want to be coming out at cooler temperatures. Well, say you have a 20-degree temperature drop, that would probably encourage you to maybe go outside and get some sunlight. And it's the same thing for those deer. And a good strategy for hunting a cold front in the morning is basically it's going to revolve around where you believe that deer is bedding at. If you know the food source and you know its bedding area, you can either set up to intercept him in between, or you could be a lot tighter to his bedding area and you're hoping that deer comes back to its bed after legal shooting light and you're able to get a shot at it. For the evening, I'd recommend hunting a food source or a scrape line or rub line that you've noticed popping up. Those can be really killer cold front hunting spots for evenings this time of year. Point number two is to hunt near bedding areas. Now, this is a controversial point because not everybody likes to hunt near bedding areas. The way I hunt, I'm mobile and I hunt a lot of different areas. I bounce around from spot to spot. I don't hunt the same spot consistently. Hunting near their bedding area will put you in better odds of seeing that deer in daylight and it basically making it to you before it's dark. If you're hunting on that food source, there's no guarantee that deer might be up an hour before dark, but it makes it 50 to 100 yards from its bed and you never see it because it's just slowly browsing, working its way towards that food source until the cover of darkness where it feels safe coming out. And hunting bedding areas in the morning can be a lot trickier in my opinion than hunting them in the evening because bucks, unless there's been a cold front or it's very close to the rut and they're coming back from chasing does late in the morning, then it's hard to be able to get in there before the deer are back in their bedding areas. I'm talking more about mature bucks because they get back to their bedding areas a lot of times, especially in highly pressured areas, before it's daylight out. And if you're going in there, you're just going to blow them out before you even have a chance just from walking in. Now that's not to say that it's still not worth hunting because you just never know and it's totally situational, but those are just factors to be thinking about when you're making your decision on how you should be hunting this time of year. Point number 3 is to hunt desired acorns. Now you can see I underlined the desired part because not all acorns, I believe, are created equal in the whitetail woods. Around here, deer really prefer white oaks for the first part of the season until they're pretty much cleaned up. Then they'll move more towards the red oaks. They're less desired. And I've heard also that the red oaks, they have a lot of tannins in it. And as the time goes on and they get rained on and basically those tannin acids will get washed off the acorns and they'll be more palatable to the deer. Another thing that you want to probably key in on are chinkapin oaks. I'm not familiar with hunting that type of oak, but if you're in an area that has those, I've heard that those are very good and preferred food sources for deer as well. Another thing that makes this time of year hard to hunt is the fact that if there's oaks around, there's food pretty much everywhere for the deer to eat. In comparison, think about a deer coming to your small wheat or clover food plot that's in a concentrated area compared to a deer having food all throughout the woods. It's much harder to key in on where that deer is going to be feeding at. Taking that into account, there are some things that can help you narrow it down. Number 1 being are basically feed trees. Is there a tree that the deer are preferring to feed under? Specifically, I'm looking for white oaks. Is there fresh sign underneath? Are there tracks? Is there a lot of scat around? When a deer eats it, it'll crack the cap of the acorn, and that's a good way to tell, or it'll take a chunk out of the acorn cap so you can tell the deer feeding there. And if you're finding fresh sign there, especially if you find also, a rub or a scrape around a white oak tree with that sign, that's probably a hot spot, and that's a hot spot now. Point number 4 really ties into the last one, which is hunting fresh sign. Hunting fresh sign really revolves around scouting. Now, that might look like you scouting and finding fresh sign and hunting that on your walk in to hunt for that evening, or it might look like you walking around specifically scouting for an afternoon trying to find spots to hunt down the road. Another thing too to throw into your scouting strategy is to do observation sits as well. That's going to help you get, hopefully, eyes on intel on a deer. Now the sign you're looking for, it might be that feed tree, scat, tracks, rubs, scrapes, trails where they're crossing a creek. And this strategy kind of depends on you finding that fresh sign and hunting it soon after, not 5 weeks down the road. Really key in and hunt that spot now because the deer are there now. There's a big difference in scouting in June and finding fresh sign and coming back in the middle of October, fingers crossed that there's going to be deer in there, compared to going in on October 15th, finding a smoking fresh rub and scrape and setting up in that area. You know that deer is there now. And the last point, but certainly not least, is to find unpressured spots. If you're able to find a spot that's not getting hunted and the deer feels safe, that's a pretty good recipe to punch some tags this October lull. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.